Hey everyone, it's Connor from Koyfin. Over the past year, we've shipped a lot of new features, enhanced existing ones, and introduced heaps of new functionality and workflows to the Koyfin platform. We pride ourselves on how quickly our full platform demos go out of date. So with that in mind, today I'm going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of the entirety of the Koyfin platform. This demo will be useful for new Koyfin users and experienced users looking to deepen their understanding of the platform. Before we begin, I would like to highlight our YouTube library. While today is going to be a high-level overview of the platform, our YouTube videos are the best way to dive deeper into specific topics and workflows and be the first to hear about new features or get involved with webinars and more. If you want to go deeper into any of the functionality that we cover today, there should be a YouTube video for it or a playlist. I would recommend checking those out. For those of you who don't know, Koyfin is a global analytics platform for researching and understanding markets. We provide data across global equities, macro, ETFs, mutual funds. We have charting, forward estimates, portfolios, and custom dashboards. Our terminal, powered by Capital IQ, Morningstar, and other high-quality vendors, is currently trusted by more than 500,000 investors. We serve many types of investors. For individuals, we provide all the necessary fundamental workflows like screening, watch lists, financial analysis, charting, transcripts, estimates, and more. And for advisors, we offer the ultimate professional package for those advisors seeking unparalleled functionality with features such as model portfolios, sleeves, custodial integration, Client Portfolios Hub, and client reporting tools for proposals or portfolio reports. For more details on our pricing and plans comparison, I've left links in the video description, or you can simply Google Koyfin pricing and check out the comparison page. In terms of structure for today's demo, we're going to start with security analysis, walking through how you would analyze equities. We're then going to move to graphs and show you all of our graphing options. We're going to come back up to this portion of the page where we show you how to create custom news screens, watch lists, and screeners. We're then going to break down each of our portfolio tools, and then we're going to cover things like market dashboards, custom dashboards, analytical dashboards, advanced search, and we'll conclude with the user settings. Without further ado, the first page that you'll see when you land on Koyfin is today's markets. This is to give you a high-level overview of what's going on in the markets on a particular day. This will tick live, and you can see that you have things like US equity markets, sectors, US equity factors, some global yields information there, global markets, currencies, and commodities. This is interactive in the sense that when you click these little checkboxes here, it's going to change what's presented to you in the chart. You can also configure the chart here with time periods, and you have some other annotation options down here as well, which we'll cover later in the video. So in terms of navigating through Koyfin, you have two options primarily. On the left-hand side, you'll find all of the categories of functionality, things like screeners and watch lists. You have portfolio tools here. You have a security analysis section, which is where we're going to begin this demo. Alternatively, you have these search boxes here, one on the left. So whatever security you have selected here, Koyfin will base whatever exhibit you're looking at around. So right now we can see this is Tesla. You also have a search bar at the top as well, which allows you to search through tickers and functionality. And you can use hotkeys here. So if I click out of this for 1 second, if I press forward stroke, I'm going to be able to now type in a ticker, press enter, maybe type in G for G-graph, and it's going to pull me over to a chart. Alternatively, you can search for features as well. So if I press forward slash and then press forward slash again, and I type in EAC, this is going to take me to the actuals and consensus page for the security that I'm filtered on. But we have a specific video on YouTube going over custom hotkeys, so I'll leave that out for now. Today, we're primarily going to be using this left-hand side navigation. So the first thing that we're going to focus on is security analysis, which is this section down here. And I'm going to change to Apple so that everything is based on Apple. The first thing that we have here is snapshots. So these snapshots will cover different themes. The first one is overview. And this is going to give you a high-level summary of the security. There's a chart here, there's some key data, there's some forward estimates, and there's a news section. This chart can be changed if you press this little drop down here. You have a bunch of pre-made templates, such as a price graph, performance, or a snapshot chart. And you can also create your own custom chart templates here as well, which is a flow we'll cover later on in the video. Next snapshot is description. It just goes a layer deeper, tells you a bit more about what the company does, gives you a bit more of the profile information, provides related securities, and some other key data. Percentile rank is an interesting snapshot. What we're essentially showing you here is where Apple trades in relation to its own history, its sector, and its country, region, or on a global scale. So I'm going to change this to country just for a second. And what we can see here is Apple's price to earnings. We can see the current is 30.9 times. Relative to its own 10-year history, this is in the 93rd percentile, so relatively high. Relative to the US information technology sector, it's in the 63rd percentile. Relative to the US as a country, it's in the 80th. And you can change this to show the 20-year history, and you can also change this to show regionally and globally as well. What's interesting here is if I take this back to country and 10-year, we can see that Apple's valuation multiples are scorching hot. They're in the 90th or above percentile. If I scroll down here, the margins are likely to be in the high percentile as well. So while Apple is trading at a relative high, the margins are also vastly superior to what they were over the same period. This isn't to say that Apple's a good buy right now, it's just to give you that extra perspective. We also have a dividend snapshot, which breaks down the dividend payments and the yield over time, and you have a table here which breaks that all down for you as well. You have some context on the shareholder yield, dividend growth, and the frequency. Ownership provides you insider ownership, so this is going to break down all of the individuals that hold the security, what percentage of the market cap that is, the number of shares held, and the percentage of holdings. We also have similar functionality for ETF exposure, so which ETFs own the security, mutual fund exposure as well. And the last snapshot we have here is earnings history. This is a really fun snapshot in that each of these bullets on the chart represent a quarter. And if you hover over those, you'll see that we show you the report date, the fiscal period, the estimate, the actual reported number, and then the beat or the miss as well. You can change the metric in question with this drop down. So we have the 5 core categories of sales, EBITDA, EBIT, EPS, and EPS gap. So I can change that like so. You can also change the period here as well. And this bar chart underneath is showing you the surprise or miss versus the average estimate. This is also presented to you in a tabular form down here. If I press full view, this is going to bring up the table so I can see this itemized in a table. I can also change the price reaction as well. So if I change this to 5, this is essentially telling me the share price reaction after 1 week following the earnings. You also have some other options here, such as changing the currency format and grouping as well. If I put this back to the normal view to include the chart, this is a good thing to mention at this point. If you ever see a chart in one of these dashboards or snapshots and you want to change it or customize it, this jump link button here will take you directly to the charting tool inside of Koyfin. So I'm going to press that now, and we'll present all the data to you there. So if you want to add additional things to this chart or save it as a template, you have the power to do so. But we'll go over the charting template flow just shortly. So coming back to snapshots for a second, although we're focused on equities right now, we do also have snapshots for ETFs and mutual funds. So if I was to filter on the SPDR S&P 500 SPY ETF, you'll find that we have a selection of snapshots for those too. In a similar fashion, you have the overview, which in this case, you can change the chart template for. You have some key data and some top holdings. You have the description snapshot as well, which gives you more context into the classification, characteristics, and description of the fund, as well as management fees. We also have percentile ranks for US ETFs and mutual funds as well. The format is slightly different in that we're comparing to funds in the same country or the same instrument type, and then we're also comparing to funds in the same country and classification as well. Here you'll have some performance data, characteristics. For US ETFs, you'll have valuation multiples, valuation yields, and you'll also have some quantitative measures as well. Funds will also have an exposure breakdown showing you all of the different types of holdings that the fund has. So here we can see sector and industry, we have a style box, and we have asset allocation. If I was to filter on a fixed income ETF, we would also have the fixed income portion of this exhibit be populated too. So here we can see that BND, Vanguard Bond Index, has about 22% in securitized bonds. We can also see the largest maturity profile is 20 to 30 years. And in terms of quality, we can see it's mostly AAA rated. Filtering back on SPY just for a second, we also have the holdings snapshot, which breaks down all of the holdings of the ETF. We show you the contribution and the return, and you can change the period here. So right now, year to date, as of the time of recording, we can see that Nvidia has contributed about 6% towards the S&P's 25% return so far this year. We break down the sectoral contribution and returns as well as the industry. And you also have this nice scatter plot here, which shows you the year-to-date change relative to the holdings weight. The great thing about this exhibit is that if you have ETF holdings, you can save those as a watch list so that you can immediately have a watch list full of all the S&P 500 constituents. You can download this table as well if you want to use that elsewhere. And you also have some other options such as notes, which will attach notes to that specific security. You also have add to watch list, which will allow you to add that security to a watch list that exists. You have some settings to configure the quote box. So these items up here in the top of the screen, these you can drag and move around. You can also edit what is shown in those quote boxes. And this is true for funds and equities. This create report button here is a flow that we'll cover shortly. And lastly, you have the dividend snapshot for funds as well. So filtering back on Apple for a second, we'll continue with the security analysis workflows. So we've covered snapshots. Up next is Analyst Estimates. So here we provide information on the actuals and the consensus from Wall Street brokers. We have price targets and the trends over time as well. So I'm filtered on Apple right now. We can see that we have the actuals reported here, and then the grayed out ones are the estimates. So I prefer to look at this the other way around. So I'm going to go to settings and I'm going to change the order from left to right. We have 10 years of trailing and 10 years of forward in terms of financials. So the 10 years of forward relates to estimates and trailing is actual reported numbers. Here you'll find anything you expect in an income statement, balance sheet, or cash flow statement. If we have estimates for it from our data vendor, which is capital Q, we will provide that here. You also have margins and ratios, supplementals, growth rates, and forward valuation metrics as well. As I showed you earlier, you have some settings here where you can show additional estimate data, which gives you the consensus estimates broken down by the number of estimates and the average, medium, and the high and the low. You can also change the denomination of the data being shown. So with Apple, quite high values here, we could change that to billions if we wanted to. We could increase the precision by adding a few decimal points. You can show and hide the currency prefix. You can change from fiscal to calendar year. And you can also show or hide the period and the reporting date. Other options you have here are to change the currency. It will default to reported currency. Apple reports in dollars. We will show you it in dollars, but you do have the option to change it to a different currency. If the currency you're looking for is not in this list, you can press Manage and pick from the library of currencies we have available at Koyfin. You can also change these to quarterly estimates as well. Moving on, we also have price target data as well. So this is going to give you the price target, the high, the average, and the low. We also have the differential here in the bottom in a separate panel. We have analyst ratings and their change over time. And then we have some price target information up here as well. Anything you see in a dashboard or a snapshot will exist as a data series inside of Koyfin. So these analyst ratings, for example, you can pull these into charts. You can pull those into watch lists. You can screen for them as well. And we'll cover that in the screener flow shortly. And again, this jump link as well. If you want to pull this information into a chart, you can always press this jump link button there. Estimates overview is a high-level summary of the core estimates. So we have revenue down to EPS. We provide that for you on a quarterly and an annual basis, and you can change what you're looking at by clicking on the buttons up here. So this is EPS, and down here we have this historical rolling next 12-month estimate versus the stock price. So if I move this back to 10 years, we can see how tightly those are correlated with each other. And lastly, estimates trends. This is going to show you how estimates change over time. So to make this more interesting, let's look at two diametrically opposed examples. So NVIDIA, we pull this up on a 3-year chart. We can see that until about the summer of 2023, forward estimates for the fiscal 2025 year for EPS gap were about 48 cents, somewhere around that ballpark. Now they're about $2.76 after countless revisions over the past year. If we go now to another company, Burberry in the UK, we're going to see the exact opposite outcome. Estimates were high until around late 2023, and then they came tumbling down as the outlook for the company degraded. If we change this to sales, we can see what that looks like on the top line. So for fiscal 2025, let's say early to mid 2023, the estimate was about 3.5 billion pounds, and that's shrunk to 2.38 billion pounds as of today. Now let's search for Apple again, and we can show you the financial analysis section of Koyfin. So what financial analysis is, it's going to break down all of the financials of a company in a tabular format. So here we've got a bunch of pre-made templates for you. We've got highlights, which just captures some capital structure, cash flow, and key financials. We then have tabs for the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow. We have multiples here. And we also have things like return on invested capital, so you can see how that's broken down as well. The great thing about FA is that if you're not particularly fond of how we have presented it for you, you can create your own custom FA template by pressing this Add New button here. So I'm going to call this one Connor's template, and we're going to be given a blank slate. So here I can add data series such as total revenues, for example. If I want to view this in a slightly more granular fashion, I might look at total revenue CAGR over 1 year. I can now rename this to year-over-year growth. I can maybe add some indentations. I can make this italic if I want to. I can also make all of the data colored. I can make this top line bold if I want to. And then I can come down and proceed to do the rest with gross profit. We might want gross profit CAGR over 1 year. We might want gross profit margin. So you can see now that I'm building a view that's kind of more how I like to look at the financials. So I'm going to rename this one year-over-year growth as well. And I'm going to add the same kind of formatting. So 3 indentations. Let's make it italic. And then we might want the gross margin here as well to be colored. Whatever way you want to build this, you can do so. You can create groups here as well. So this might be key stats. You can then build another group, which is cash flow, and you can continue building those types of views that you like. When you're happy, you can save this as a template and you can refer to that whenever. You can also drag this to the front of the queue, so it's the first one selected when you come to financial analysis. We have a great masterclass that covers how to create custom templates. I would highly recommend checking that one out. So next down in the pecking order is news, filings, and transcripts. This kind of does what it says on the tin. We have other ways in Koyfin to surface news, filings, and transcripts, but this is just a place for you to view these for one specific company. You can see here that I can open these and read them inside of Koyfin. These will update live during the day, and you also have the same kind of functionality for press releases. So we can see Apple's fourth quarter results here coming through. We also have filings for US companies as well, which come from the SEC database. So you can open up the 10K for Apple, and you can read that directly in the platform. We also have a global coverage of transcripts, which includes everything from analyst days to investor presentations, M&A calls, and the regular quarterly earnings calls. Transcripts, you can read these, you can print them as PDFs. You can also highlight specific search terms. So for Apple, I'm interested in China. This is going to take me to all the sections of the transcript that mention China. We also have a way to search the entire library of Koyfin transcripts as well using this advanced search function. So I'm just going to jump to transcript search here. This essentially allows you to pour through all of Koyfin's transcripts. So if I want to look at the word China, I'm going to put that in brackets. I'm going to search for that. And I'm also going to narrow down my view just over the last 3 years. You can see we have about 31,000 matches here, which is still pretty high. You might want to limit that to specific companies by using this search box here. You might want to import a watch list that you've created. So here's my portfolio. I'm going to pull that in, and now it's only giving me examples of my portfolio. So I can see Burberry here. I'm going to pull in all the instances of China. We've got Meta in there as well. We've got Visa, Starbucks, AMD, PayPal. This is tailoring your universe to kind of how you like to search. You also have some other options here as well, narrowing it down by sector, and you have event types as well. So here's all of our event type coverage, and you can specify which ones you want to see. If you want to get a bit more technical, we have advanced terms here. So you can have any of these words, exact words or phrases, and you can also exclude words as well. The other item in advanced search, just while we're here, is security search. So if you're ever unsure about the type of coverage that we have at Koyfin, you can ask us or you can use security search as well. So the asset categories here, you have equities to warrants to mutual funds. If I'm interested in economic data series that Koyfin carries that related to the fishing industry, what I would do here is change the asset category to economic. I would type in the word fish. I would press enter, and then I would narrow down the country to US only. And here we have a selection of all of the fishing economic data points that Koyfin has. You can click these tickers and it will pull open a chart for you. Alternatively, if you're interested in looking at the different types of security we have for Apple, you can type in Apple. You can change the asset category to equities, and we'll break down all the listings of Apple that we have from Kazakhstan to the US to Austria. So those are some of the key workflows for the kind of bottoms-up fundamental analysis of individual securities. Now we're going to move on to graphs. Graphs lives at the bottom of the page, and you'll see that we have different graphing options here. So I'm going to walk through quickly what each of these graphing options are, and I'm going to highlight a few examples in each one. We could spend hours on graphing alone. It's certainly one of the most popular areas of Koyfin, so I'll try to keep this one brief. At a high level, historical is the most powerful charting tool that we have in Koyfin. It's the Swiss Army knife. It does absolutely everything. It's the most customizable. Downside of that is that sometimes specific workflows are faster using other chart types. So I'll come to historical last. It's enough to say that for now it's the Swiss Army knife. These other three chart types, they do one job and they do it really well. So performance graph, all this does is shows you the total return and the CAGR over a period of time. On the left-hand side, you have the ability to add tickers. So I'm going to add Amazon here, and you can see that gets added to the chart. I can scroll and change the time period. I can also just click the periods up here as well. If I want to, I can press these gear icons, which are the indicator settings. I'm going to cover that more in depth in the historical chart, but for now, we can see that we can change the chart type. So area, bar, line, things like that. We can also change the chart styling. So Apple, if I want that to be black, I want the line to be thick, I can do so. Amazon, typically associated with the color yellow, I'm going to make that yellow and thick. So by default, the performance graph shows total return. You can also use this to compare funds if you like. So if I want to look at these two securities performance relative to the SPY, I can do that as well. There are a bunch of other annotations here and sharing items as well, but I'm going to cover those all in the kind of flow of the historical chart because they're the same across all of the different charting types. Intraday does one thing, and it shows you the intraday price of securities. So US and Canadian are live or 15-minute delayed. At the moment, everything else is end of day. So this will only work for those first two securities. At the time of recording, we are not intraday, so this won't tick live, but during the day it will. And you have from 1 to 10 days of context here. If you want to add another ticker, such as Amazon, you can do so. If you want to right click on the chart and group those axes, and then you can also turn them into percentage changes as well, which might be better for you if you're looking at intraday. The comparison chart is probably the second most powerful chart we have in Koyfin. It's essentially the historical chart, but it's for one specific workflow, and that is comparing securities. So I'm going to delete all of these right now, maybe to show you an example. What I'm going to do is take Apple. I want to look at the total return. I want to look at the gross profit margin. I'm going to add that here. And then I also want to look at the EBIT margin. And I want to look at the net income margin. So the benefit of the comparison graph is that it color codes everything related to a specific ticker. You'll see that the ticker selection is up here. The metrics are down here. They're separated from one another. If I now want to add a company like Microsoft, what this is going to do is color code everything and pop them into the correct panels. Let's change this to 10 years. If we want, we can also add other securities here like Amazon as well. When I change the color of Amazon to yellow, for example, it's going to make that across the board and make everything yellow. Some of the limits to customization you have here is that you can't change the chart style. So you can't make these area graphs. You can't make them bar charts. You can't hide specific data series from specific panels. So if I want to remove Apple's gross margin from here, I can't really do that. It removes everyone's gross margin. So this is purely for comparative purposes. Now, we'll see the difference when we go to historical charts. So right now I'm comparing Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, and we have a bunch of data series here. If I go to historical chart now, you'll see it looks slightly different. The selection is up here, and all of the data series for that ticker are underneath it. So if I now want to add Microsoft, you can see that that has its own set of data series underneath as well. So to show you an example, let's go ahead and take the same data series that we had previously. You'll see first glance, these are all separately colored. It has put them into separate panels for me. But now when I type in Microsoft, you'll see that although it's put them into separate panels, the color coding is off. So I would have to come in here and change the color of all of these Apple metrics to blue. I would then have to do the same thing for Microsoft as well. Benefit you do have here, though, is that you can hide individual data series. Because these data series are linked to the security, I can hide Apple's gross profit from this chart without impacting Microsoft's. Additionally, with the historical chart, you can merge panels. So these legend icons here, which allow you to push panels across the page. So if I want to merge net income and EBIT margin, I can do so. In this case, I might want them to be different colors so I can more readily identify them. A bunch of other things that we can do with historical chart as well that are only capable in historical chart. As I said, we can probably spend hours here, so I'm just going to walk through a few different workflows, highlight a few of the settings, and I would encourage you to refer to our masterclasses on charting if you want to get deeper insight there. The beauty of fundamental chart is that we can build fundamental views of companies pretty easily. So I'm going to type in total revenues here for Apple over the trailing 12-month period. I might want this to be a bar chart, and I'm going to right click here and make this linear. Now I might also want to include gross profit. Let's take trailing. I might also want to include EBIT. Let's take that trailing as well. And then I might also want to take free cash flow, and let's say free cash flow margin as well. So now I have a bunch of data series. I want to push gross profit up into this one. I also want to merge all of these, like EBIT and free cash flow, into this same chart. So you can see this creates a funny structure where we have 4 different axes. Because they're all notional values, I can merge them into one. So I'm going to right click here and just group the axes. And if I spend a bit of time designing these colors, making them a bit thicker, maybe changing the color of total revenue so that it's not quite so bright. We can now overlay gross profit, EBIT, and net income over the total revenue. We've got free cash flow margin here as well, which I'm just going to make an area chart and make it yellow. So you can build fundamental views like this, and when you're happy with those, you can save them as templates. So just for now, I'm going to save this as a template, which is sales and earnings with free cash flow. The benefit of creating a chart template is that you can now use that template across the system, which will show you in other workflows. It also means that I don't have to recreate this chart every time I want to view it. So if I want to now change this to Coca-Cola, I can type in Coca-Cola and it's going to give me the same view that I've just created. Oracle chart is also great for economic charting. So if I want to look at the Fed funds rate, for example, we can pull that up here. These data series obviously don't relate to that, so I'm just going to put in a price chart. And now let's say I want to overlay the 2-year. So let's make this thick for a second. I'm going to type in the United States 2-year bond yield. I'm going to make that linear. And I'm going to pull that over 20 years. And let's make this a slightly brighter color, or one that's not as close to blue. So here we've kind of overlaid those 2 values there. So we've got the Fed funds rate and we've got the 2-year bond yield. And what we can kind of see is that the Fed fund rate tends to follow the 2-year. If I wanted to share this chart with someone, I can press this share button here and I can customize this to my preferred type of view. So I typically like a black background We might want to go into the customization settings here, reduce the size of the legend. It's looking pretty big there. We might want to make the y-axis labels value only. You can make some other changes here as well, like grid lines. You can add logos to your chart as well, add titles, but I'm happy with this for now. So I could take this, copy it or download it and share it with a friend. So my number one piece of advice for charting with anyone that's new to Koyfin charting is press these indicator settings. They're so useful and you can learn a lot about charting this way. So for an example, let's go back to Apple and let's just go to print a simple price chart. So every single data series has a slightly different way that you can transform it. So the historical chart, if we open those indicator settings, you can see that we have line charts, we have a bunch of different candle options where you can configure the colors for the up and down, you have area, and you have bar chart as well. You also have things like volume overlays, you have volume by price overlays as well. You have some transformation options and some statistical bands. And you'll notice that when I look up another data series, you're going to have a slightly different set of customizations. So let's look at PE on a forward basis. I'm just going to hide this historical bar chart for now. If I open the indicator settings, you can see we have some limited charting type options. You can still change the color. You can change the fiscal periods here from trailing to next 12 month. Transformation, you have a few different options here. So a lot of data series have this concept of you can show the drawdowns, the year-over-year change notionally or as a percentage. You have what's called a multiplier. You have relative valuation. You can transform this to show performance. So if I want to see how much Apple's P has expanded over the last decade, I can actually change this to performance and we can see that it's pretty much doubled over the last decade. So 106% growth. If we open this back up again, and I want to see relative valuation, so what's Apple's PE relative to the S&P? We can see that it defaults to S&P, but I can also change this to say Microsoft. And now that's the relative factor in this equation. Some other workflows are really interesting, particularly with multiples. If we take the EPS next 12 month consensus average, so let's take next 12 months. This is one of the inputs to the forward price to earnings multiple. And let's go back and just put this PE back to as reported. So right now, before we move on, I'm just going to open up these settings and I'm going to add y-axis labels here because I want those to be in the chart. So right now we can see that Apple's PE is about 30.9 times forward earnings. On a 10-year basis, let's look at what the average has been. So I'm going to take PE, open indicator settings. I'm going to go to statistical bands. I'm going to take the mean. And we can make that mean a light purple if we want to. It doesn't really matter. You also have some other options down there like standard deviations, highs, lows, medians, that kind of thing. So the current P is about 31 times and the 10-year average is about 20.6. So if I want to know what price Apple would be today if it traded at its 10-year average multiple, we can do that with the multiplier transformation. So EPS normalized consensus average. I'm going to open up the indicator settings. I'm going to go down to multiplier. I'm going to times this by 20.6. So that's pretty interesting. If we want to take the 20-year average of PE, we can do that as well. So 21.1. Let's take another EPS next 12 months data series. And let's multiply this one by 21.1. Well, we can see that's quite close. So let's just go ahead and just make this one 15 just for the fun of it. So let's go back to 10-year. So we know that this orange line here is the 10-year average. This one is just an arbitrary 15x multiple that we've assigned. Now let's add one last one, multiply for the current price to earnings, which is 30.9. What I'm going to do now is hide this price to earnings chart, pull up the historical chart. Let's make this aligned. Let's make it black and thick. Let's get rid of the volume overlay. Let's get rid of the volume overlays there. And now let's merge all of these up into the price chart. So what we have here is essentially Apple's current share price, and then all of these bands, if you like. These are the share price at constant multiples. So the green one is the current multiple, we pull this over 10 years, we can see that Apple is seldomly traded at this level. Only in the last few months has it kind of surpassed that 30x multiple. This 20.6 is the 10-year average. We can see that up until about 2020, it traded significantly below that. And this 15x multiple, we can see that Apple did in fact trade below 15x in the early 2015-2016 period, once again towards the end of 2018, and it's seldom traded as cheaply ever since. This is a great view to analyze companies with, so I'm going to save this one as PE bands. There are many workflows that you can do with historical charts. We just don't have the capacity to cover them all within the scope of this video. I would highly recommend going to our webinars playlist on YouTube and looking at Advanced Charting for Fundamental Investors webinar. As far as some of the remaining things that I want to show you with charts here, we have the annotations down at the bottom, so you can add things like circles and squares. You have Fibonacci retracement lines, which can be customized, both the level and the color. You have text boxes here as well. You have things like arrows, percentage change ranges, which have a CAGR option, which you can turn on and off. You have value labels to pick out specific data points from the charts you're looking at. You have lines, both vertical and horizontal. Let me just clear this for 1 second. You can also draw channels there as well, which you can color code and change the fill. One of my personal favorites is the pencil. You can just freehand draw all over the chart. And if at any point it gets a little bit too busy on the chart, you can just delete everything with this trash can, or you have an undo and a redo button there as well. On the right-hand side, you have some settings here, such as changing the grid format. So if you want this to look bare, you can get rid of those if you want to. You have the legend label on off as well with this icon. You have the mouse over as well. So if I just remove these, you'll see that when I'm hovering over data points, you'll see this mouse over. You can turn that off by deselecting it down here, and then that won't occur. You'll just have the crosshairs. The crosshairs is another one that you can remove as well, like so. And this adjusted, unadjusted button is really interesting too. To show you what that is, let's go to AT&T. Let's pull up the whole history of the chart that we have, and let's just get rid of these. So the adjusted, unadjusted is price. If you Google AT&T price, you'll find like Google Finance, for example, will show you the unadjusted price for AT&T. So adjusted, unadjusted essentially allows you to pick whether you want to adjust the price historically for dividends or not. So by default, most platforms will not show you it, including dividends, which would look like this for AT&T. So if we go back to 2016, you can see a peak of about $43. If I now adjust this for dividends, which AT&T pays quite a lot of, you can see that the adjustment shows that it was a high of about $20. This is really a user preference. We just give you the option to show both. Some other things you have here in the chart is the ability to show the table. So this will itemize all of the data series that you select. So you can see that now I'm unhiding these, they get added to the table. This data is not downloadable as it's restricted by the data vendor. You of course have your settings here on the right-hand side, which allow you to change everything from the log or linear scale type. You can group axes. You can change the range of the axes as well if you want a higher minimum max value. You can also change crosshairs, grid settings, the size of the legends, and everything like that. Your templates that you create live both here in this dropdown. So here's one that I created earlier for Bollinger Bands. And you've also got them in this side panel here as well. I'll try and conclude it there with charts. There's obviously a lot of stuff we can cover here, but again, I'll just point you to the YouTube masterclasses and webinars that we have for charting. And now we'll move on to the next portion of the demo. So let's navigate up to this top half of the screen. So we started today on today's markets. We showed you this nice dashboard. We have some big hitter functionality in here in watch lists and screens. I'll just quickly cover the market news section. So market news, these ones that you're looking at here are all templates that we give you. Our primary news provider is MT Newswires. You'll find that in the Plus plan and above. It's what we consider premium news. We give you a few different tab options here, such as analyst changes, economy, we've got industrial news there as well. You can also create your own templates. So if I hit this add new button here, let's look at US and European buybacks. This is all I'm interested in. So what I'm going to do is give that a name, and now we're going to look for topics. And all I'm interested in is corporate events. And let's look at stock buybacks. Now, for the region filter, I can pick specific countries, but I'm just interested in Europe and North America. So let's create that. We now have that news feed, and this will update live during the day, and I can see all the companies I'm interested in and all of the buyback announcements they are making. Market movers is a really great feature, and it shows you all of the gainers and losers of a particular universe of stocks. On a single day, you have the ability to filter for pre and post market as well. And this functionality is something that's used throughout Koyfin. So if you see this drop down here, this allows you to tailor the investment universe specific to the holdings of an index, holdings of an ETF, or a watch list that you have created. So whatever you select here will then filter the universe by that basket of companies. So if I want to look at the Russell 2000, for example, I can click that. Or if I want to look at the Energy Select Sector SPDR ETF, I can pick that as well. Now, watch lists, I say watch list has the Pareto principle inside of Koyfin. If you spend time to build watch lists, it's really going to power a lot of functionality inside of Koyfin. You can do a lot of things here. To create new watch lists, you have this new button here. We'll give you a bunch of different templates to give you some inspiration. You can import from a CSV or just copy paste the tickers. You can alternatively just get started from scratch. So this is just watch list one. I'm just going to create that. The first thing we do is give you a blank table with a selection of columns. If you want to change these columns, what you can do is you can drag and drop them. You can right click, you can rename them, you can remove them. If you press this columns button here, this is also going to give you the ability to move them around, to delete them. So if I just delete all these for a second, we give you the whole arsenal of Koyfin data series at your disposal here. So anything from an income statement to a balance sheet to a cash flow statement, we have margins, growth rates, and CAGRs. We have asset specific data series for equities, ETFs, mutual funds, and model portfolios. We have high level security information. We have basic market data, extended hours, price, performance, technicals. You also have all of the analyst estimates here, both notional and percentage. You have revisions. You have those percentile ranks that we showed you in the dashboard as well. And you also have the ability to create custom formulas and labels. So before we do any of that, I'm just going to add a few tickers here. So you can add equities, ETFs, and funds. You can also use these to build macro-centric dashboards as well. So here's one, for example. This is country inflation. What we have here is headline month-over-month inflation. For all these different countries or regions, we have the last reading, we have the trend versus the last reading, and then we have this chart showing the trend. I grouped these into month over month. We also have year over year here as well. Or you could also build something that's maybe more equity focused is a portfolio. We've got a bunch of labels here. We've got shares, 1 day P&L, cost basis. We've got earnings date. We've got some custom labels, some notes. Or you might want to build something that's more centric to kind of ETFs and mutual funds. You've got expense ratios, management fees, turnover, classifications. Or you might want something that kind of shows all of the model portfolios that you've created and their returns. So let's go back to watch list. And the first thing I'll do is just add a few tickers. So let's take Tesla, Nvidia, Amazon, Apple, and Meta. I might be interested in a few different things here. So let's look at the country flag. Let's look at total turns over a year-to-date period. We might want quarter-to-date. We might want 5-year, 10-year. We might want market cap in here. Let's look at price to earnings. Let's look at price to sales as well. So there's just a selection of things that I might be interested in. You can kind of move these around in whatever way makes the most sense to you. You can sort by these tables as well. You can delete specific items by right-clicking on them. You can also bulk delete by clicking these checkboxes, hitting bulk actions, and deleting. Over here on the right-hand side, you have summary rows. So if I want to summarize some of these, like let's look at the PE, for example. I want to look at the average PE. So let's take average. This is going to give you a nice row at the bottom of your table, which averages those. If there are any data series that you don't really care for, like the average total return year to date, you can right click there and hide those specific data series as well. You also have some other rows such as market cap, weighted, you have percentiles and the range, high, max, lows, that kind of stuff too. You have grouping functionality here. So if you want to group by category, country, sector, for example, you can do so. And this will allow you to kind of collapse and fold these groups. You also have those summary rows per group as well. So this population is pretty small. There's only about 5 companies in here, but we have an average PE of 74 for consumer discretionary, 37 for information technology, and 23 for communication services. Naturally, you would find that as the watch list is bigger, this will be more insightful information. You can change the currency format in a watch list as well. Again, similar to like what we showed you in the actuals consensus, you can pick a currency here, or you can pick one that's not in the list. When you're happy with a view that you've created, you don't need to then create a new watch list to have another way of looking at the securities. So if this is the view that I like, I'm going to click on this drop down here. This one is called Overview. If I now create a new view, you can give this a name. I'm going to create this as new, but we essentially give you a blank slate to start again. So if I now want to build a view that's related to total returns, for example, like here's one that I prepared earlier. So if I don't want to build this from scratch, I can import it from another watch list. So let's go to add watch list views. Let's go to import table views. I know that this portfolio watch list has a really nice view in it called total return history. So let's go performance by year. I'm just going to import that. Now I have that for my portfolio. So this is how you would kind of flick between views in your watch list. So it's the same baskets of stocks, but you can have multiple views. You can share those views between watch lists as well. Going back to what I said at the beginning about custom columns and tables, if we go to this portfolio view here, this includes custom labels, which are these things here. So I turn this to ETF if I wanted to. This little notes tab here, which allows me to add my own personal notes, that's a custom column. So we'll show you an example of a few of those. So let's go to columns, custom columns. We have formulas, labels, dates, numbers, and text. Text is a text box. Number is a box that only takes numbers. Dates is a date box. Color labels are cool, so we will show you those. And formulas as well. So let's imagine that free cash flow margin is something that doesn't exist in Koyfin, or free cash flow margin excluding stock-based comp. If we don't have that, you can create that. So let's take free cash flow margin, excluding SBC as the name. If Koyfin has the data series, you can derive an output from those. So let's take free cash flow, let's take total revenues, and let's take stock-based comp. The expression that I want to portray here is A, which is free cash flow, take away B, which is stock-based comp, and then divide it by B, which is total revenue. I want this to be a percentage. I'm now going to create that column, and let's put the color labels in there as well. So here we are calculating that custom column that you just created, which is great. And you can get fancy with it and create the types of custom formulas that you want. And just to show you how color labels work here, I'm going to type in red here. I'm going to type in blue here. I can assign these labels colors like so, and now I can add those to the rest of my securities. Some use cases that you have here are things like adding price targets. If you're in a team, you can add the name of the analyst covering the security. You can add labels like buy, sell. You can add quality scores. Koyfin users have been using these labels creatively, and I've seen so many different ways of people doing it. So it's kind of up to your imagination. But these color labels are really useful. And the nice thing is that you can group by those. So if I group by color labels, you can see it now we have a red group and a blue group. I mentioned teamwork there for a second. So watch this behave kind of like a Google Sheet. If I press this share button here, I'm going to be able to add the email address, preferably the Koyfin email address, but it doesn't have to be, of an individual I want to share this worksheet with. I can give them a viewer or editor access. Editor essentially means that when they make changes, I'll see that in real time. Viewer means that they cannot make changes. They can view only. Really nice feature for collaboration there. And the last thing I'll show you about my watch list before we move on are these quick actions. So this is a relatively new feature that we've released. If you press quick actions here, you have only 2 options today. Hopefully by the next full platform demo, we'll have more. First one is a scatter plot. So this is going to create a scatter plot based on securities that you have in the portfolio. So let's look at 2 metrics. Let's take total return year to date, and let's take PE ratio next 12 months. Very nicely, we just plot that based on the securities inside of your watch list on a table, on a scatter plot. Really nice compared to variables. The other option you have there as well is the quick actions news. So this is super powerful. It's something I use every day. If you press this button, it's going to give you a tailored feed based on the securities in your watch list, configured to show things like news, press releases, filings, and transcripts. So you can see here as I scroll through, you'll see a mixture of those kinds of things. They're all readable inside of Koyfin. See a Burberry transcript here. If I want to filter this down and get rid of news, maybe get rid of a bit of the noise, let's maybe get rid of press releases as well, just focused on filings and transcripts, it'll do that for you as well. Moving on to screener now, we do have screeners for equities globally. We have ETFs and mutual funds in there as well. The way that you would create an ETF is by pressing this new button here. We give you a bunch of templates again for inspiration. You would get started from scratch. And from this window, you would select whether you pick an ETF, mutual fund, or stock screener. I'll go through the stock screener workflow initially just because it's quite similar across all three. You usually start by defining the investment universe first. So do you want US? Do you want European? Do you want all of the above? Do you want to filter by specific countries, exchanges, industries, sectors, things like that? You've kind of defined your investment universe. You then have that library of data series that you have available to you in Watchlists, for example. If I want to look for companies with an EBIT margin that is positive, so profitable companies. I'm only interested in companies between 150 million market cap and 1 billion. You can see already that we're narrowing down a search from about 13,000 names to 1,600 to then 720. I might just want to look for something like total revenue CAGR over the last 3 years. And let's say we want that to be greater than 7.5%. We're going to narrow that down further. So you can add a bunch of parameters here, and then you have the ability to show ranges. When you're happy with your screen and the number of matches, you give it a name and you create that screen. So here's a few different examples of ones that I've created. So this one shows you companies in the US and Europe without any analyst coverage. So if I press modify criteria, I can show you how I created that. So in selections, you can see that I've picked Europe and United States and Canada. And then in the filter criteria, I've taken the number of strong sell ratings all the way through to buy ratings, and I've just zeroed them all out. So this gave me about 500 matches. And then when I created that screen, I added a few additional columns. I also added a description column as well, because I'm unlikely to be familiar with many of these companies. Here's another example of companies in Japan that show high revenue and estimated revenue growth, as well as profitable margins. Here's another one that uses the percentiles to show companies that are trading at relatively low valuation percentiles, but then they also have high margins as well. So we can see Amazon is in here, for example, PE of 35. Relative to its 10 and 20-year history, it's in the bottom percentile. And if we scroll over to margin percentiles, we can see that EBIT, gross margin, and net income percentiles have never been higher. Here's just a sneak peek at some of the things that I've added. So we can see that we've got EB to EBIT percentile, PE percentile, we've got profitable gross margin, and then we have EBIT and gross profit percentiles as well. And it gives out some really beaten down names. Like right now, at the time of recording, L'Oreal, you'll find a lot of alcohol companies in here as well, a lot of luxury companies, Hugo Boss is in here. And they're all companies that are trading at relative lows, that are profitable, and their margins are relatively high. So some great opportunities could be found in here. Screeners are shareable as well. So if you press share, they do share in a slightly different way because screeners are less collaborative. They are private by default. If you switch it to public, you can share this URL with another user. They can then copy that screening output into their Koyfin terminal. You can also save these outputs as watch lists. So say I'm interested in sifting through these names. I want a bit more customizability. I want multiple views. I can save this as a watch list and then play around with it in my watch list feature and also use this universe in other areas such as advanced transcript search, market movers, and more. And the process looks similar for ETFs and mutual funds as well. Here you have universe criteria and you have filter criteria as well. Just bear in mind that the fund criteria will be specific to funds. You can't search for revenue for a mutual fund. So let's take a pause right there. We've covered some of the fundamental workflows. We've looked at security analysis, we've looked at charting, we've looked at watch lists and screeners. Now we're going to come into the portfolio tools segment. And shortly after that, we'll cover this little section here, which includes dashboards. We have three different types of portfolio functionality inside of Koyfin. They each differ in their use. And we'll begin with the simplest, which is My Portfolio. So my portfolio was constructed largely for individuals. So the problem set we looked to solve there was I'm an individual. I have maybe 3 or 4 brokerage accounts. One might be retirement, one might be taxable, one might be my trading portfolio. There's no place for me to kind of aggregate all of these portfolios into one space and analyze them as a collective unit. In short, my portfolio is for individuals who want to track a current portfolio. The infrastructure of my portfolio is based on sub-accounts. So you can see here, if I open up the creation window, I have a taxable account, I have a retirement account, I have the ability to add new accounts. And how you would do this, let's call this one my IRA. And how you would do this is add tickers. So let's say that I just bought 50 shares of Tesla. It cost me 125 bucks, and I bought that today. Now let's say I actually bought 25 last week that I forgot about and I paid 100. My portfolio allows you to add lots to the portfolio, and this will be presented both at the aggregate and the lot level. You can also change the portfolio currency here as well, and all of your instruments will be converted to that portfolio currency. So if you own European stocks in a USD portfolio, the profit and loss will be converted to US dollar, and we'll show you the FX impact as well. The benchmark selection largely relates to the exposure exhibits that we'll show you in just a second. So I'm going to save these updates to my portfolio, and you'll see that those lots of Tesla are now presented with the chevron dropdown. So in all, I have about 79 shares, broken down by 50, 25, and 4 units. Everything will be aggregated at this parent level, so average cost, and everything will be lot level in the lots themselves. If we look at a UK stock like Greg's, for example, and scroll over to the profit loss, you'll see that we have a profit and loss from FX column here. So P&L excluding the FX change is $192, including the FX change is $136. These total returns also include dividends and the FX impact as well. So the profit and loss tab is where you can analyze the profit and loss, the quantities, the holdings of the portfolio, and the lots. You also have the ability to show summary rows here as well. You can group by account. So we've created 3 separate accounts, an IRA, a retirement, and a taxable. I'm going to group by account there, and then I might want to summarize. I might just want to sum so I can see the value of each portfolio, which is 25,000 bucks, 7,000 bucks, and 16,000 bucks. We have the watch list news option here as well, similar to what I showed you in the watch list table. You can edit the portfolio by using the edit portfolio button. One thing to note here is that these portfolios are current portfolios. We don't currently support historic transactions, so sales, things like that. That is something we hope to do in the future. Moving on to the exposure page, this is going to break down the exposure of the portfolio across various different themes. So we have security here, which is kind of a high level, all of the securities in the portfolio. We have instrument type, which you can see is split between ETF and equity. This could include things like cryptocurrency or mutual funds as well. Asset allocation is going to break that down by asset allocation. So fixed income, cash, equity. We have sector, we have industry here as well. The nice thing about these portfolios is that if you own US ETFs, we will look under the hood of those ETFs and show you the exposures of the underlying. And if you look on the right-hand side, you'll be able to filter this table that we're showing you all of the breakdown by particular sectors or industries. So if we go to sector, we can see consumer discretionary. Let's filter by that. We can see which parts of our portfolio are contributing towards that sectoral exposure. And this is the same for countries. If we want to go to the UK and see our UK exposure, we can see that there's 2 positions there, Burberry and Greg's, and then we also have a little bit of exposure coming from 3 ETFs here as well. If you have any ETFs with bond exposure, we'll break that out for you, as well as the credit quality and maturity as well. If you have a benchmark selected, you'll then be able to change this view to a versus benchmark view. So the toggle here will turn this from a pie chart to a bar chart like this, and we'll show you the relative over or underweight that you have relative to your benchmark. Lastly, the analysis page is a place for you to construct watchlist-like views. You can also import these from your watchlist using the flow that I've shown you before, or you can create views that make sense to you. Moving on to client portfolios, this is a slightly different use case. Although it looks like the UI of a My Portfolio, it's really built for kind of the professional use case. If you have 1,000 portfolios, or you want to manage client portfolios and prospect portfolios, this is how you would do that. So My Portfolio, the concept is you have one portfolio with sub-accounts, client portfolios. Potentially you can import thousands of portfolios here. So to show you an example, here is Mark Smith Prospect. This is a new client that I've just signed. Here's all of his portfolio data. We have the exposure exhibits that look similar to the My Portfolio exposure exhibits. We have hypothetical performance here as well. And then we have the analysis tab there as well. We also have the create report function, which I'll show you just in a second. With client portfolios, you can create these manually. So if I press add new here, I can get started from scratch. The creation flow looks similar to a My Portfolio creation flow where you can add tickers, benchmarks, currencies, and cash positions. Alternatively, you can add from CSV. If you go through this flow, we'll provide an example of what we need from you there, and you can upload those using the CSV. Or if you have a Schwab connection, there's information on how to get connected with Schwab if you go to this Learn How button. You can import these directly from Schwab by connecting a master account, and then you have all of your clients' accounts, which can be loaded into Koyfin every day. Because of the sensitive nature of Schwab integration, I can't really demo that for you today, but we do have an anonymized dummy account that we provided in this demo right here, which will walk you through the Schwab integration process. Moving on to model portfolios. If you think of My Portfolio and Client Portfolio as real money, they're based on quantities, cost per shares, they have P&L. Model portfolio is kind of the paper or simulated money aspect of that. From an advisor's perspective, a model portfolio is for the proposal. The client portfolio is when you land the client and you have their portfolio details. So let's run through a very simple example of a model portfolio. I'm going to go create new. I'm just going to get started from scratch. I want to create a 50-50 equity to bond portfolio. So what I'm going to do is add SPY for my equity exposure. I'm going to add BND for my bond exposure. I'm going to press this drop down, just equalize the weights. We have some other options here, such as choosing notional or weight as your allocation type. You have an initial value. You have a currency selection for the model as well. You can choose a benchmark, a start date, which has some logic there as well. So first common is going to be the earliest conceivable date the portfolio could have started based on IPO dates. Custom is then any date after that. If you want to include your advisor fees in the performance as well and the reports, then you can enter those here, and you have this rebalancing period. So this current allocation is going to start on the 10th of April 2007. If I select this to rebalance monthly, every month it's going to rebalance back to my target allocation, which is 50-50. If I change this to none, then these two positions are going to start at 50% and float until the current date of my portfolio. Alternatively, I can add custom allocations so that if I wanted to rebalance at some point in 2012, I could do so. On this date, whatever the weightings are on April 11th will be rebalanced back to 50-50 on April 12th, 2012. I'm going to remove this just for 1 second, and we'll just create this very simple portfolio just to show you some of the exhibits that you'll get with the model. So we have this summary page here, which gives you the style box and the fixed income box. The holdings table will break down the holdings. You have some key stats up here as well. Exposures look pretty similar to the ones that you've seen before. You'll have these benchmarked against your chosen benchmark across all of the same themes, such as country, region, fixed income sectors, and equity sectors. You have performance charts here, which also include rolling annual return, and you can change the periods or select a custom period here by using the calendar. Historical returns then breaks that down by a monthly and annual basis, and you can also show these as portfolio or benchmark absolute returns, or you can show them on a net basis as well. Risk analytics calculated over the period of the portfolio will show you things like alpha, Sharpe, Sortino, and trainer ratio. You also have the drawdown history as well, which will be based on the duration of the model portfolio. Then you have stress test periods as well. The holdings matrix is really useful if you own a collection of funds. It will show you the overlap of the underlying security exposure as per those funds. Because we have SPY and BND here, it's unlikely there's going to be much overlap. But if I go into the edit portfolio dialog here and add QQQ, let's save those changes. We can see that there is some overlap here. So we have in all 7.6% exposure to NVIDIA, 5.6% of that comes from QQQ, 2% of that comes from SPY. We can see there's quite a bit of overlap in these holdings here. So there is a very simple portfolio, but what if I wanted to create a portfolio of portfolios? I might want to add new. Let's get started from scratch. We can also use the model portfolios as sleeves inside of a new portfolio. So we created our 50/50 equity bond exposure model. I might also want to add some 80/20 growth. I might want to add my global growth model, my global growth ex-US model, and let's take one more, my growth equity. So just for ease, let's equalize those weights and create this portfolio. You'll now see that we show you all of the underlying data from the model portfolio sleeves that you've used. The holdings table looks slightly different here as well. So we can see the underlying of the particular sleeves. In our 50/50 equity bond, we just had 3 ETFs, QQQ, BND, and SPY. We have a global growth model, which just has Apple in it, and we also have a global ex-US model, which just has Greg's in it. These are obviously not robust models. They're just for demonstration purposes. We'll generate the performance that you need from those. Now, an integral part of model portfolio and client portfolio flows, particularly for advisors, is reports. So we give you customizable reports for these portfolios. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this portfolio we just created report example so I can find it. Now let's go to the create report flow. Right now, we're going to get started from scratch because we don't have any templates. So the first thing to do is pick your portfolio or fund. So we picked this report example portfolio, and I'm going to compare this to the SPY. In the report, I want the name to be displayed as report example for my model, and I want the name to be displayed as named for the SPY. Or let's go ahead and call it benchmark, actually. Let's go next. We can give this a title. I'm going to call this portfolio report demo. The client's name is Warren Buffett, of course, prepared by, let's just go ahead and say Connor. You can add a logo here at this point as well. And we can also customize the start and end date, which is particularly useful for end of quarter reporting. So if I wanted to push this back to the end of September, I could do so. I won't do that for now, and we'll just press next. So this is the portfolio edit flow. You can see that we have various tabs here. The order of these can be dragged and dropped. You have pages, which includes all of the context of the report. You have details, which allows you to change the naming or the primary and secondary portfolios. And you can also edit the dates here as well. And then we have style as well. So you can change the cover design, you can add company logos, or you can also configure this to your brand color. Going back to pages now, we have the cover here, and then we have the first thing we have is comparison summary. So this is a nice overview of the fees, the performance, and the risk of the portfolio versus the comparison portfolio, which might in one case be a proposal. It might just be comparing two funds. The holdings summary will then break down some key stats and top holdings for the primary portfolio. We have the holdings matrix exhibit for both the primary and secondary portfolio. Equity exposure breaks down the style box, and then the comparative regional and sector exposure. You have the same for fixed income exposure. We have the performance overview, which shows you by year and then trailing total returns of CAGRs. We have the performance chart, which is cumulative and over the period that you selected for the portfolio report. We have risk and stress test data here in this exhibit. Stock X-ray, which shows you the top holdings performers of the primary portfolio. We have quantitative data series here, as well as some cash and fee sensitivity exhibits. The disclosures page is a place for you to learn about how the data series inside of the report are calculated. You can, if you want, customize this and add in your own disclosures and then save those changes. Alternatively, if you want to add notes pages, you might want an investing policy statement to be at the beginning of this. You can customize this, say investing policy statement, you can add some text there, save that change. And when you're happy with that, You can drag that up to the first page if you want and present that to the client. If at any point you want to hide specific exhibits, you can come to equity exposure, for example. This eye icon will hide that from the report. When you're happy with your report, you have a few options here. Number one, you can save this as a template. If this is the way that you like to structure reports generally, you can save that as a template, meaning you don't have to customize it every time you come in to create a report. It will be available to you in the creation flow. Secondly, you can now create this report, which will be printed off as a PDF, and you get a nice preview of what this will look like for the client or for internal purposes before you do so. Going back to the report creation, you can see that we now have that template that we created just a second ago. And reports can include things like funds, model portfolios, and client portfolios as well. We have dedicated videos for all of these advisor workflows, from reports to client portfolios, to model portfolios, to rebalancing, to sleeves. I highly recommend checking them out on our YouTube channel. Coming to the last section of this whistle-stop tour, we have dashboards. Market dashboards are pre-made dashboards that we build that are based on economic data or themes such as US sectors. We have countries, we have factor analysis there as well. And they're typically constructed with charts, tables, and sometimes a matrix as well. If I click on these checkboxes on the left-hand side, you'll see that they get included in the chart. Alternatively, I can check this matrix here as well, and that will configure the chart settings. If I come to a dashboard like currencies, you'll see that we have a slightly different matrix, but similar rules apply, where I can check these checkboxes and they will be added to the charts. Here we'll show you things like country data, factors, global yields. You have yield spreads, corporate credit, commodities, and other themes. My dashboards is a space for you to create custom dashboards. So if we get started and press a new one here, these are constructed based on other features in Koyfin, like watchlists, charts, filings, and scatter plots. So let's go ahead and add a watchlist in here. And let's go to our portfolio watchlist. Let's add a chart. And now what I'm going to do is press on the watch list, and you can see that the chart changes depending on what is in the watch list. And we can add multiple charts in here as well. So I might want to add a news feed here just for all of the securities inside of the watch list. I might also want to make this chart slightly smaller so that I can fit in another one. Let's go ahead and add another chart. And let's drag this over here. This relies on the chart templates that we showed you earlier. So I think I showed you the Bollinger Bands. Let's go ahead and select that one. Now let's pick another chart template as well. I think we looked at PE bands or sales and earnings with free cash flow. We can maybe make this one a bit narrower, and we can change the period so we can see more context there as well. And we might also want to have a scatter plot in this dashboard as well. Dashboards can be used to create macro views. They can be equity-centric, fund-centric. As long as you can build a chart template for it, you can construct a dashboard for it. I would highly recommend checking out our dashboard masterclass as well for more context there. The last stop on this whistle stop tour is analytics. Here we have a bunch of great features that rely heavily on that functionality that I showed you in market movers. So the earnings calendar allows you to construct an earnings calendar based on the holdings of an index, ETF, or watch list. So right now, let's just take my portfolio holdings, for example, or if we want something a bit more populated, let's take the S&P 500. We can configure this to show the next 7 days, where about 18 companies are going to be reporting. We can group these into their various dates if we like, or sectors. I typically prefer dates. So I can see what's coming tomorrow, what's coming today. And you also have some context here on the estimates as well, from everything from EPS to revenues. And if we go on a last 7-day basis, you'll see that these get populated as the results come in. Economic calendar is going to give you a calendar for all of the economic data series you might be interested in. You can press this country filter here to filter by specific countries, or you can just show all of the countries by default. Each of these segments are interactive in that you can press them and they will show you a chart with all of the data on it. You can open this graph in the charting tool, and if we have the data for it, we'll show you the consensus estimate for it as well. You can scroll down and you can see what is in the pipeline for the week ahead for economic variables. Some other features in here include lots of charts. This borrows on the concept of importing from indices, holdings, and watch lists, as we've said multiple times now, and it also uses chart templates. So right now we're looking at the S&P 500. All of these securities are included there. If I want to look at them in a slightly different way, let's take Bollinger Bands as an example. This is going to give me a bunch of different charts, all with the same template for different securities. If I want this to be a bit clearer, I might open up the options settings and let's just put maybe 6 charts in this window here. So now I have 6 charts. If I want to, I can use my arrow keys to just sift through all of the holdings of the S&P 500 for this particular chart template. I might want to change these to show PE bands or the sales and earnings with free cash flow one that we created earlier. And let's take 5 years. So it's a nice way to maximize the value that you get from creating one template to then applying it over multiple securities at once. Market scatter, we've shown you this in a few other areas of Koyfin already today, but this is going to allow you to express a relationship between any two variables on an X and Y basis. You have all of the data series that are available in a watch list or a screener. And you can plot those on the scatter plot, and we'll show you the data on the right-hand side in a table as well. If you like linear regression, you have the choice to show that in the chart. There is an annotation option for it here. And lastly, we have the yield curve chart. It does one thing very well. It shows you yield curves. I'm just going to remove these ones and we'll add today's US yield curve. Similar to charts, you have some formatting options. So if I want to make this a thick line or make it dashed, I can do so. I can change the color as well. I also have the ability to hide and show the labels as well as the legend label. And I can configure the grid settings here as well. If I want to add another US yield curve, so let's take something from pre-pandemic, for example, let's go back to January 1st, 2020. I can also add other countries in here as well, up to a maximum of 10. Like if we take the US yield curve in November 2022, we can plot all of those yield curves in the same space. So that just about does it in terms of functionality. I have tried to keep this as concise as possible because this could be a 3-hour long video and I don't want to keep you too much longer. The last thing we will cover today is the user settings because there's a few important things here. So up on the right-hand side, you have a few different icons and options here. This will open Koyfin into a full screen. These options here will let you pull up watch lists or news tabs or market movers on the right-hand side. And then you also have that logic of ETF, watch list, or indices. And at any point, you can collapse those by pressing the X button. You have the feedback form here, which is very useful to us. It allows users to submit bug and data errors tickets, submit feature requests, ask questions, or just give general feedback. We monitor these and respond every single day. So if you want to reach out to us, please do so. And lastly, you have your account settings here as well. So if we go to My Profile, this is where you can control your password, your email, some account information. You also have the ability to change Koyfin Terminal into different colors and themes. You can change the general application of positive or up colors from green to red to whatever you might want it to be. For example, when a P&L item in a watch list flashes green for positive, you can make that orange if you like. Preferences, this will allow you to show or hide the live background blinks. You can set up default historical graph commands. The My Data page will show you all of the existing templates or assets that you've created inside of Koyfin. And of course, you have your plans and billings page. Teams will allow you to create teams inside of Koyfin. So when we walk through the sharing flows, you can share those with individuals. If you create a team inside of Koyfin, what you can do is automate the process of sharing to multiple people at once. You would drop their emails inside of here, and then instead of sharing it to an individual, you would share it to a team, and all of the individuals inside of that team would get that shared asset at once. And lastly, integrations is where you manage your integrations with custodians like Schwab. If you stuck around for the entirety of this video, I just want to say thanks for listening. It is hard to cover everything inside of Koyfin in a short amount of time. I will just remind everyone that if you do want to reach out to us, our help desk is help@koyfin.com. We are at Koyfin Charts across all of our socials. You can drop a comment in the comments section below. And I would highly recommend keeping an eye on and subscribing to our YouTube channel because we dedicate a lot of time to illustrating workflows here, providing product release demos, hosting webinars, and providing masterclasses for all of the features and functionality that we want you to learn. As always, thank you for listening. Until next time, thank you.